In today's lesson, we're going to go ahead and take a look at how to apply a sort of AoE explosive effect using the physics system in Unity. So we'll start off with a quick demo here of what we got. So I'm going to come over here. We're going to shoot a little ball. Oh, I missed. So when it hits, you can see we have a nice big AoE. There we go. So how do we do this? Well, let's take a look. So to start off with, we have these Evil Cubies. I have 3 of them. We'll zoom out a bit. Here we are, just hanging out. Being a bunch of... And if we go ahead and take a look at the inspector, it's just a standard cube. All I've done is just go ahead and make it red and add a rigid body to it. I haven't changed any of the values in the rigid body. They're all the defaults. But I have come up here to the layers and I've switched it over to the enemy layer. Now by default, the enemy layer is in there. And if you're new to layers, when you want to add one, you click add. It's going to open up all the layers here. Now take note that you only have access to 32 layers and the first 8 are used by Unity. So you have 24 that you can actually customize. If you run out of layers, well, I guess you're just tough out of luck. So if you know you're going to be using quite a few layers ahead of time, you're better off to sit down and start planning out how you want your layers to work. And later on, you can get into a much more complex setup with layers where you can have layers that interact with different layers or ignore other layers. And you can set this up down here. But we won't be playing with that in this video. So all 3 cubies are the same. I've just gone ahead and given them all different names. If we go ahead and look at the ground, that's nothing but a plane that I've gone ahead and thrown a texture on. Nothing special there. We'll go ahead, we'll take a look at this wall. Now the wall is constructed of blocks in a 4x3 grid. If we go ahead and open it up, we notice that there's 2 different types here. There's destructible and non-destructible. If we go ahead and take a look at a non-destructible one, I actually have a whole column of them. All they are is just simple cubes that I've gone ahead and applied a texture to. Nothing about them is different than any other cube we make in Unity. Now if we go ahead and take a look at the destructible ones, which all the rest are, I've gone ahead and added a rigid body, and I haven't changed any of the properties on the rigid body. I left them just to the basic values, but I have come up and added them to the destructible layer. So the cubies are on the enemy, my blocks are on destructible. Now the reason why I put them on separate layers is later on when we take a look at the grenade, I just want to show how you could interact with more than one layer, and you can pick and choose the layers that you want your particular physics to interact with. But that's it for the props in my scene. Let's go ahead. We're going to take a look at my FPS controller. So this is the one that comes with Unity. If we go ahead, just right click, do import package, come down to characters. You're going to get this folder here. If you open it up, go into characters, first person, prefabs. This is the one I use. I went ahead and just dragged and dropped it in. If we go ahead and expand it, I went ahead underneath the first person controller character, the one that has the camera prefab. I went ahead and let's zoom in on this a bit. And with it selected, I just right click to create cube, then go ahead and scale and move the cube over to the side till I get this effect here on the screen. Like a square arm or gun. Then I also go ahead and select the gun, right click and create an empty. And all I'm doing is creating a spot where I want my grenades to spawn from. So this is my grenade launcher, and this is where they're going to spawn from. On the gun, I've also gone ahead and turned off the collider, because when my grenades are spawning, I don't want to accidentally have them collide with the gun and explode at the tip of my gun. There's a couple ways we could do that. When, they collide with a collider, I could check to make sure the collider is in my gun and that. It's just so much easier. I don't need a collider on this gun. Just turn it off and I don't have to worry about it ever happening. So we also have the gun script. So let's go ahead. We'll take a look at this here. The firepower is just how much force we're going to shoot the grenades with. So think of it like throwing a football. The bigger the number, the harder you throw it, the further it goes. Projectile prefab, we'll look at that in just a second, but it's basically when I hit a button, what do I shoot? I'm going to shoot these grenades. And where do I want to shoot them from? And of course, that's just my barrel tip at the end here. So let's go ahead, we'll look at this grenade. So I've gone ahead, made prefabs for everything. We'll look at the grenade now. There's only 2 scripts in this project. One for the gun, which is basically just input and shooting out the actual grenade. Then the grenade itself. So the grenade is just a sphere. All I've done is just come in, just create a 3 object sphere. I've scaled it down a little bit so it's not this giant sphere in my scene. I've added a rigid body, and the only property I changed was the drag. I just increased it a bit so that the ball would slow down a bit as it traveled, just so it wouldn't keep going on forever. Well, obviously gravity's going to pull it down anyway, but I just wanted a little bit of drag just to slow it down its forward progression. So the grenade script. The first parameter is just the particle effect that we want to spawn. I've gone ahead and downloaded the Elemental free package. And which one was it? This one here. So when my grenade hits, that's the effect I get. Explosion radius. Let's zoom out a bit. Anytime we hit or collide with another collider, it's going to take the point that we hit and cause an explosion, which is a sphere. And this tells us how big it is. So let's say we hit right at this point here. So the radius is 5. So it goes 5 in every direction. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's going to be like out here. So you're going to have this huge sphere. And anything inside of that sphere is what is going to be affected by the explosion. And the force, this is just how much force we're going to apply to the objects that are inside of that sphere. Now, objects that are closer to the center of the sphere are going to have a much more drastic reaction to the force, as opposed to things that are just on the fringe of this sphere. Now, affected layers, this is where I went ahead and change the layers. So it's going to start off by nothing by default. You can go ahead and select the layers that you actually want to be able to interact with. And you can select as many as you want. For this example, I'm just doing the destructible and the enemy. And that's it for the Unity setup itself. Let's go ahead and we'll jump in and take a look at the scripts. So the first script we're looking at is the gun script, which of course we've gone over the public stuff that's already shown. Well, it's not public, it's serialized. But again, we got the firepower, what we want to instantiate being the grenades, and where we want to launch them from. So in the update script, I'm going to go ahead and wait for them to press a key. In this case, I'm waiting for the number 1 key to be pressed. And when they press that, I'm going to go ahead and instantiate one of the grenades at the tip of my gun, facing the direction that my gun's facing. Then after I've instantiated that into our game world, I'm going to go ahead, grab its rigid body. I'm going to add a force to it. And that force is going to be in the direction that the grenade is facing. Then I'm going to add a modifier to it, basically give it a bit of power to throw. And we want to make sure that we're using force.impulse. It's that explosive force, so it gives that nice blast at the beginning and then it just sails the rest of the way. Nothing special here. We've done this a ton of times. Let's go ahead and we'll look at the grenade script. All right, the grenade script, we can go ahead. We've already gone over again all the serialized field stuff. The particle system that we want to instantiate, the radius of the explosion, how much force we're going to apply to things inside of the radius, and what layers we want to affect. So our grenade, when we launch, anytime it collides with anything else in the scene with a collider, Unity automatically calls the on-collision enter. And from that, we can go ahead and actually see what we hit with. Now, in this example, I don't care what we hit. As soon as we hit something, I want to go ahead and instantiate that particle effect. And as far as telling it where we want to instantiate it, I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, whatever the first contact point was of the collider that we collided with, that's the point in 3D space where I want to instantiate our particle system. And I've gone ahead and just made it face the same way. And looking at this code, I just realized that I did not put a way to actually destroy these particle effects. So after they're done being used, I'm just going to end up with a bunch of used up particle effects in my hierarchy. But that's fine. This is just a demo. So after we're done with the particle effects, we're going to go ahead and call this method here for adding an explosive force to everything that's within that radius. And I'm going to pass in the point of contact that we had, that vector 3. And it comes down to this method here, which we'll look at in just a second. But after it's done adding all of the explosive forces, we're going to go ahead and just destroy that grenade. So let's come down. We'll take a look at the explosive forces. So we want to know where we're going to apply the force from, at least that center. So if you're following along with the space game that we're making, we've done a ton of physics raycasting. That's one of the whole points, was just to grind it into you. But there's so many other things that are included in the physics class. And in this case, we're going to look for the overlap sphere. And what this does is it takes that point where we want to have the center of the explosion, and then it goes ahead and grabs everything inside of the explosion area based on the radius. And we can also pick and choose exactly what we want to grab. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and say grab everything that's on the affected layers that we've selected, which in this case is the enemy and the destructibles. So this line here is going to go out, grab everything that's in that range that fits all this criteria, and it's going to save all of those colliders off in an array. And I call this array things I hit. Then once we have that array, all we have to do is just go ahead and iterate through it. Go ahead and take a look to see if it has a rigid body on it. And if it does, we're going to go ahead and add an explosive or an explosion force. And when you're adding an explosion force, it's going to ask you how much force to apply. In this case, this is the value of 20 up here. The center of the explosion, so where the explosion came from. The radius of the explosion, so it knows how much force to apply to our object. You scroll this over a bit. Class it over a bit. So this number 1, if we went ahead and let's just put another column here. I always forget the name of this one. The upward modifier. You can go ahead and put a 0 in here, and that'd be much more accurate simulation. What the number 1 does is it kind of moves the explosion down 1 unit. So the force that's going to be applied to your object is going to push it upwards. So it's less accurate as far as simulation goes, but I find it gives a much more pleasing effect in a game because your objects fly up more. So go ahead and play around with this a bit. I've actually never tried to add a negative number here. Maybe we could, and it would apply a downward force. But usually between 1 and 2 is the only thing I use. But again, it's one of those variables that's kind of like season to taste. You know, depending on the scale of your game, maybe you want things to really fly up high when they get hit by stuff. Either way, at the end, you're going to want to apply that force mode impulse again. And that's actually it. So we'll jump back into the game. Let's go shoot some stuff. We'll go ahead and try to shoot right inside. Let's go ahead and hit that pillar of things that can't be destroyed. Oops. There we go. I forgot I actually set it to 1. I was clicking the button. And I missed. There we go. Well, now I'm hitting it. So let me redo that. But if you notice, the pillar itself obviously doesn't move, but everything around it does. So even if you hit the pillar, the force won't be applied to it, but it's still applied to everything around it. There we go. Let's see if I can hit it in the air. Nope. There we go. Where are they? Got them. So you can actually shoot things in the air too. But anyway, there we go. That's how we get that grenade-like effect. Let's go ahead. We'll stop this here. And that's it for this demo. Let me know down in the comments what you thought of it. Is it something you're going to add to your game? Or maybe you do it a different way. Let me know down below. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye. So if you liked the video, go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below. It really does help me out here on YouTube. And go ahead and follow me on Twitter. I can be a pretty chatty guy over there when I'm not walking through a forest or being stalked by eagles and falcons, lions, tigers, and bears.